Sometimes the most embarrassing moments lead to the most beautiful connections, and sometimes all it takes is getting stuck in a washing machine to discover what home really means. It was one of those perfect Saturday afternoons when nothing special was supposed to happen. David had just poured himself a steaming cup of coffee and settled into his favorite chair by the window. The newspaper was spread out in front of him, and he was looking forward to catching up on the week's news. The sun was shining through his living room curtains and everything felt peaceful and quiet. He had moved to Maple Street just 6 months ago, and he was still getting used to the rhythm of suburban life. After years of living in a noisy apartment, downtown the silence of the neighborhood was something he treasured. His house was small but cozy, with a neat front yard and a garage that he had turned into his little workshop. Most days he barely saw his neighbors except for the occasional wave when they were getting their mail or walking their dogs. David worked as a computer programmer for a local tech company. He spent most of his weekdays staring at screens and solving complex problems with code. Weekends were his time to relax, read, maybe work on some small projects around the house. He was a quiet person by nature, someone who preferred books to parties and felt more comfortable fixing things than making small talk. Just as he was getting comfortable with his coffee and newspaper, he heard something that made him look up. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was at his front door and they were knocking pretty hard. He glanced at the clock on his wall. It was barely noon on Saturday. He wasn't expecting anyone. The knocking came again, more urgent this time. Knock, 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 knock. Whoever was out there really needed something. David sighed, set down his coffee cup, and walked to the front door. Through the small window, he could see someone standing on his porch, but he couldn't make out who it was. When he opened the door, he found his next-door neighbor standing there, and she looked absolutely frantic. Her name was Lisa, and she was a nurse who worked at the children's hospital across town. He had talked to her maybe 3 or 4 times since moving in, usually just quick conversations about the weather or the neighborhood. She seemed nice enough, always polite and friendly, but they weren't really friends or anything. Today, though, Lisa looked completely different from the calm, professional woman he occasionally saw leaving for work in her scrubs. Her brown hair was messy and damp with sweat. Her clothes were covered in white soap bubbles and there were wet spots all over her shirt and jeans. She looked embarrassed and desperate at the same time. "Oh, thank goodness you're home," she said, breathing hard like she had been running. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but I have a huge problem and I don't know what else to do." David just stood there for a moment, trying to process what he was seeing. His quiet Saturday morning had suddenly turned into something completely unexpected. "Okay," he said slowly. "What's going on? Are you hurt?" Lisa shook her head quickly. "No, I'm not hurt exactly, but I'm kind of stuck." She paused, looking even more embarrassed. "This is going to sound really weird, but I got my arm stuck in my washing machine and I can't get it out." David blinked. He had heard lots of different problems from neighbors over the years. Locked out of the house, flat tire, cat stuck in, a tree, but this was definitely a new one. "You got stuck in your washing machine?" "I know it sounds crazy," Lisa said, talking faster now. "I was trying to get my work clothes out of the bottom of the machine. You know how sometimes stuff gets caught under the agitator thing in the middle? Well, I reached down to grab my scrubs and somehow my arm got wedged in there really tight. I've been trying to get it out for almost an hour." She held up her left arm, which looked red and slightly swollen. David could see soap suds still clinging to her sleeve. "I tried everything I could think of. Soap, twisting different ways, even tried to relax and let my arm shrink down. Nothing worked. And then my phone battery died right when I was going to call someone." David felt his brain trying to catch up with this information. His neighbor was stuck in a washing machine. This was definitely not something he had ever dealt with before. "Okay. Wow. Wow," he said, running his hand through his hair. Lisa's face turned even redder. "I know this is really weird and embarrassing. I thought about calling the fire department, but I don't even know if this counts as an emergency. And I was hoping maybe you might have some tools or ideas that could help. You seem like someone who's good at fixing things." That was true. David had always been handy with tools and mechanical problems. Growing up, he had helped his dad fix cars and appliances around the house. Even now, he enjoyed taking things apart and figuring out how they worked. But a person stuck in a washing machine was definitely outside his usual area of expertise. "You've been stuck for an hour?" he asked, starting to understand how serious this actually was. "Maybe longer," Lisa admitted. "I was supposed to be at work in 3 hours for my night shift, and I really can't miss it. We're already short-staffed at the hospital and the kids are depending on us." She looked like she might start crying from frustration and embarrassment. David felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a weird situation anymore. This was his neighbor who needed help, and she had come to him because she trusted him enough to ask. Even though they barely knew each other, she thought he might be able to help her solve this problem. "Let me grab some tools from my garage," he said, already heading back inside to get his shoes. "We'll figure this out." David grabbed his toolbox from the garage and followed Lisa next door to her house. Walking into her laundry room was like stepping into a disaster zone. There was water on the floor, soap bubbles everywhere, and wet towels scattered around like she had been trying everything she could think of to solve this problem. The washing machine was one of those older models with the big agitator in the middle. It was still humming quietly, halfway through its wash cycle. Lisa was standing next to it looking exhausted and frustrated. Her right arm disappeared into the machine up to her elbow, and she couldn't move it more than an inch in any direction. "How did this even happen?" David asked, setting his toolbox down on the nearby counter. He had never seen anything quite like this before. Lisa sighed deeply. "I was rushing to get my work clothes clean before my shift tonight. I work in the pediatric ward and we've been so busy lately. 3 nurses called in sick this week, so everyone else has been pulling double shifts." She gestured toward the machine with her free hand. "My favorite scrubs got tangled up under the agitator somehow. I could see them down there, so I thought I could just reach in and grab them real quick." "And your arm got stuck how exactly?" David asked, walking around the machine to get a better look at the situation. "Well, I reached down between the agitator and the side of the tub," Lisa explained. "The space looked bigger than it actually was. When I grabbed my scrubs and tried to pull my arm back out, it wouldn't budge. I think my arm swelled up from all the twisting and pulling I was doing." David could see what had happened. The space between the agitator and the drum was just wide enough for her arm to slide down when it was relaxed. But when her muscles tensed up or swelled from the struggle, it created a tight seal. It was like one of those Chinese finger traps, but much more serious. "Okay, let's think about this logically," David said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "First thing, we should probably turn off the machine. No point having it running while we work on this." He found the power button and pressed it. The humming stopped and the house felt quieter suddenly. Lisa looked relieved that at least the machine wasn't moving anymore. "Have you tried soap?" David asked. "Something slippery might help." Lisa nodded toward the counter where several empty bottles sat. "I used up almost all my dish soap and hand soap. I even tried some cooking oil I found in the kitchen. Nothing worked. It just made everything more slippery, but my arm still won't come out." David examined her trapped arm more closely. It was definitely red and swollen, probably from all her attempts to free herself. He could see that forcing it wasn't going to work. They needed a smarter approach. "What about changing the angle?" he suggested. "Maybe if we tilt the machine or lift it somehow, we can create more space." Together, they tried rocking the washing machine gently back and forth. It was heavier than David expected, filled with water and clothes. Even when they managed to tilt it slightly, Lisa's arm still wouldn't come free. "This isn't working," Lisa said, and David could hear the worry creeping into her voice. "I'm supposed to be at work in 2 hours. The kids on my ward, they're used to seeing me on Saturday nights. Some of them specifically ask for me when they're scared or can't sleep." David had never really thought about what Lisa did for work, beyond knowing she was a nurse. Hearing her talk about the children she cared for made him realize how important her job was, and how much stress she must be feeling about missing her shift. "Tell me more about your work," David said, partly to distract her while he thought about other solutions. "You work with kids?" Lisa's face softened a little when she talked about her patients. "Yeah, pediatric oncology mostly, kids with cancer." I know it sounds depressing, but it's actually amazing work. These kids are so brave and funny. They make me laugh every single day, even when they're going through the hardest thing anyone should ever have to face. That sounds like really important work, David said, genuinely impressed. He spent his days writing code and fixing computer problems. Lisa spent hers helping sick children feel better. The thing is, Lisa continued, we're so short-staffed right now. If I don't show up tonight, they'll have to pull someone from another department, and that person won't know the kids or their routines. There's this one little boy, Tommy, who always has nightmares around bedtime. I've been working with him for months to help him feel safe. If I'm not there, David could see how much this meant to her, and it made him more determined to find a solution. He examined the washing machine again, looking for any way to create more space or change the angle of her trapped arm. What if we try ice? He suggested. Maybe we can reduce the swelling in your arm. Lisa's eyes lit up. That's actually a really good idea. I should have thought of that myself. I'm a nurse, for crying out loud. David went to her kitchen and came back with a bag of frozen peas and some ice cubes wrapped in a dish towel. Lisa held the cold compress against her upper arm while they waited for the swelling to go down. After 10 minutes, they tried again. David added more soap around her arm while Lisa tried to slowly twist and pull. For a moment it seemed like it might work. Her arm moved slightly, and they both got excited. But then it stopped again, still firmly stuck. I think we need professional help, David said finally. This is beyond what we can handle with household tools. David pulled out his phone and stared at it for a moment. He had never called emergency services for anything like this before. Was a person stuck in a washing machine really an emergency? It felt strange. But Lisa was clearly in distress. And they had tried everything they could think of. I'm going to call the fire department, he said. They deal with rescue situations all the time. Maybe they've seen this before. Lisa looked embarrassed again. Are you sure? I feel so stupid. What? If they think this is a joke or a waste of their time? Look, David said, putting his hand gently on her shoulder. You're stuck, you're in pain, and you have important work to get to. This isn't stupid. This is just one of those weird things that happen sometimes. He dialed the non-emergency number for the local fire department. When someone answered, David explained the situation as clearly as he could. The dispatcher on the other end didn't sound surprised at all. Oh sure, we get calls like this more often than you'd think, the dispatcher said cheerfully. Washing machines, playground equipment, park benches. People get stuck in all sorts of things. We'll send a crew out to help. Should be there in about 15 minutes. While they waited, David went back to Lisa's kitchen to make some coffee. He figured they might as well be comfortable while they waited for help to arrive. That's when he heard a gentle knock at Lisa's front door. Are you expecting someone? David called from the kitchen. No. Lisa called back from the laundry room. Could you get it? I'm kind of limited in my mobility right now. David opened the front door to find an elderly woman standing on the porch with a pitcher of what looked like lemonade and a plate of cookies. She was probably in her 70s with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Hello, dear, she said with a warm smile. I'm Betty, from the house across the street. I saw all the activity over here and thought you might need some refreshments. Is everything all right? David had never met Betty before, but he had seen her working in her garden most days. She seemed to know everyone in the neighborhood and always waved when she saw him. Well, David said, not sure how to explain the situation. Lisa is having a bit of a mechanical problem and we're waiting for some help to arrive. Betty's eyes twinkled with curiosity. Mechanical problem? Oh my. Is there anything I can do to help? Before David could answer, Lisa called out from the laundry room. Betty, is that you? You might as well come in. This day can't get any weirder. Betty followed David into the laundry room, took one look at the situation and immediately started laughing. Not in a mean way, but in the kind of delighted way that made everyone else want to laugh too. Oh, honey, Betty said, setting down her pitcher and plate. I haven't seen anything this interesting in years. How on earth did you manage this? Lisa found herself laughing too, despite everything. I was trying to get my work clothes out, and apparently I'm not as coordinated as I thought. Well, you're certainly not the first person to get into a tangle with household appliances, Betty said matter-of-factly. My late husband once got his head stuck in a porch railing trying to retrieve a tennis ball. The fire department had to come with special tools to get him out. He never lived it down. David poured lemonade for everyone while Betty entertained Lisa with stories about various neighborhood mishaps over the years. It was amazing how much more relaxed the whole situation felt with Betty there. She had this way of making everything seem normal and manageable. The fire department is really good about these kinds of things, Betty told them. My grandson Jake works for them, and he says they get calls for stuck people at least once a week. Usually it's kids who climb into places they shouldn't, but adults get stuck too. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Right on schedule, they heard sirens approaching. Through the window, David could see a fire truck pulling up in front of Lisa's house. A few neighbors had come out of their houses to see what was happening, but they kept a respectful distance. 3 firefighters came to the door, carrying various tools and equipment. The crew chief was a tall man with a friendly face who introduced himself as Captain Rodriguez. The other 2 were younger. One was a woman named Officer Chen, and the other was a man called Officer Thompson. So we have a washing machine situation, Captain Rodriguez said after David explained what had happened. Let's take a look and see what we're working with. The firefighters examined Lisa's trapped arm carefully, asking her questions about how long she had been stuck, whether she had any pain or numbness, and what they had already tried. They were completely professional and treated the whole situation with the same seriousness they would bring to any other rescue. This is actually a pretty common problem with older washing machines, Officer Chen explained. The space between the agitator and the drum can create a perfect trap. We have special tools designed exactly for this kind of situation. Officer Thompson went back to the truck to get their equipment, while Captain Rodriguez continued examining the machine. The good news is that you don't appear to be injured, and we should be able to get you out without too much trouble. The bad news is that we might have to damage the washing machine a little bit to make enough space. Lisa looked disappointed, but nodded. I understand. The machine is pretty old anyway. I was probably going to need a new one soon. David found himself feeling bad about Lisa's washing machine getting damaged, especially when she had mentioned money being tight lately. But there wasn't much choice at this point. Betty had been quietly observing everything, and she stepped forward. Don't you worry about a washing machine, dear, she said to Lisa. My son just bought me a new one last month, and my old one is sitting in my garage. It works perfectly fine. I just wanted a fancier model with more buttons. You're welcome to have it. Lisa looked surprised and touched. Betty, that's incredibly kind, but I couldn't just take your washing machine. Nonsense, Betty said firmly. What else am I going to do with it? It's just taking up space. Besides, neighbors help neighbors. That's how things work around here. Officer Thompson returned with what looked like a small hydraulic jack and some other specialized tools. All right, he said. Let's get you free from this thing. Officer Thompson set up his equipment carefully while Captain Rodriguez explained what they were going to do. We're going to use this small hydraulic spreader to gently expand the space between the agitator and the drum, he said. It's designed specifically for situations like this. We'll go very slowly and make sure you're comfortable the whole time. David watched as the firefighters worked with practiced efficiency. They had clearly done this kind of rescue before. Officer Chen positioned herself where she could monitor Lisa's arm and vital signs, while Officer Thompson operated the hydraulic tool. Captain Rodriguez coordinated the whole operation, talking Lisa through each step. You might feel some pressure as we expand the opening, Officer Chen warned. Let us know immediately if you feel any pain or if your fingers start to tingle. The hydraulic spreader made a soft whirring sound as it slowly pushed against the washing machine's internal components. David could see the metal drum flexing slightly as the tool created more space around Lisa's trapped arm. That's it, Lisa said after a few minutes, sounding excited for the first time all day. I can feel it loosening up. My arm is starting to move a little bit. Officer Thompson stopped the hydraulic tool, and Officer Chen carefully checked Lisa's arm. The swelling has gone down quite a bit, she reported. I think we can try a manual extraction now. Captain Rodriguez applied some special lubricant around Lisa's arm, while Officer Chen gently guided her through the process of slowly rotating and lifting her arm. After several tense minutes of careful maneuvering, Lisa's arm suddenly came free. Oh, my goodness, Lisa exclaimed, pulling her arm close to her body and examining it with relief. I thought I was going to be stuck there forever. Everyone in the room cheered and clapped. Even Betty, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, applauded enthusiastically. David felt a wave of relief wash over him. He hadn't realized how worried he had been until the moment Lisa was finally free. Officer Chen examined Lisa's arm thoroughly, checking for injuries and testing her range of motion. You've got some bruising and swelling, but nothing serious, she reported. I'd recommend ice and rest for the next day or two. You might be a little sore tomorrow. What about work? Lisa asked. I'm supposed to be there in an hour. Captain Rodriguez looked at her with a paternal expression. Ma'am, I'd strongly recommend taking the night off. Your arm has been through some trauma, even if it's not seriously injured. You need to let it recover. Lisa looked conflicted. David could see her weighing her sense of responsibility to her young patients against the firefighter's medical advice. Why don't you at least call your supervisor and explain what happened? David suggested. Maybe they can find someone else to cover your shift, or maybe they'll tell you to come in anyway. At least then the decision won't be entirely on you. Lisa nodded and asked David if she could use his phone since hers was still dead. She called the hospital and spoke to her supervisor, explaining the unusual circumstances of her day. David and the others could hear her side of the conversation, and it was clear that her boss was concerned about her well-being. When she hung up, Lisa looked surprised and relieved. My supervisor told me to take the night off and rest. She said, they'll manage without me for one night and she wants me to see a doctor tomorrow just to make sure everything is okay with my arm. The firefighters packed up their equipment, but not before Captain Rodriguez took a look at the washing machine. The rescue operation had damaged the internal mechanism pretty badly. The agitator was bent, and there were some cracks in the drum, where the hydraulic spreader had applied pressure. I'm sorry about your machine, he told Lisa. We tried to minimize the damage, but sometimes there's no way around it in these situations. Don't worry about it, Lisa said. I'm just grateful to have my arm back. Besides, Betty already offered me her old washing machine. Betty beamed at this mention. I'll have my son bring it over tomorrow, she promised. It's practically brand new. After the firefighters left, Betty insisted on making dinner for everyone. You've all had quite an adventure today, she said. The least I can do is feed you. She bustled around Lisa's kitchen like she had been cooking there for years, pulling ingredients from cabinets and the refrigerator. David found himself helping Betty prepare the meal while Lisa rested on her couch with an ice pack on her arm. It felt natural and comfortable, like they had all been friends for years instead of barely knowing each other that morning. You know, Betty said quietly to David while she chopped vegetables. Lisa's been having a tough time lately. Her roommate moved out a few months ago, and she's been trying to manage all the bills on her own. She works so hard at that hospital, sometimes double shifts just to make ends meet. David glanced over at Lisa, who was dozing on the couch. He felt a new appreciation for how stressful her day must have been, not just because of being stuck, but because of all the other pressures she was dealing with. She seems like a really good person, David said. Oh, she is, Betty agreed. She helped me when I had pneumonia last winter, even though she barely knew me then. Brought me soup every day for a week and made sure I was taking my medicine properly. That's just the kind of person she is. They prepared a simple but hearty meal together, grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and some pasta that Betty found in Lisa's pantry. When everything was ready, they woke Lisa up and all sat around her small dining table. I can't believe how this day turned out, Lisa said, looking around at her unexpected dinner companions. This morning I was worried about getting my laundry done, and now I'm having dinner with my neighbors who helped rescue me from my own washing machine. David laughed. It's definitely not how I expected to spend my Saturday either, but I'm glad I could help. You both did so much more than just help, Lisa said seriously. David, you didn't hesitate to drop everything and come over when I needed someone. And Betty, you turned what could have been a horrible, embarrassing day into something that actually feels kind of wonderful. Betty patted Lisa's hand gently. That's what neighbors are for, dear. We look out for each other. As they finished dinner, David realized that this strange day had given him something he hadn't expected when he moved to Maple Street. He had found real community with people who cared about each other. It was the kind of thing he had always heard about but never really experienced for himself. The sun was setting outside, and Lisa's house felt warm and peaceful. They talked about their jobs, their families, their hopes for the future. David learned that Betty had been a teacher for 40 years and still tutored kids in the neighborhood. Lisa shared more stories about her work with sick children and how much it meant to her. When it was time to clean up, they all worked together, washing dishes and putting things away. David couldn't remember the last time such a simple activity had felt so satisfying. 2 weeks had passed since the washing machine incident, and David's life had changed in ways he never could have predicted. What started as a quiet Saturday morning had somehow turned into the beginning of real friendships with his neighbors. True to her word, Betty had her son deliver her old washing machine to Lisa the very next day. David had helped install it in Lisa's laundry room, and they had both been amazed at how much nicer it was than her old one. It had all sorts of settings and features that made doing laundry actually seem pleasant. "I feel guilty having such a nice machine," Lisa had said as they tested it for the first time. "Don't feel guilty," David had replied. "Betty's happy it's being used, and you definitely deserve something good after what you went through." Since then, Lisa had been bringing her laundry over to David's house every few days. Not because she needed to, but because they had developed a comfortable routine. She would show up with a basket of clothes and a cup of coffee from her favorite cafe downtown, and they would sit in his kitchen talking while the machines ran. David looked forward to these visits more than he wanted to admit. Lisa had fascinating stories from her work at the hospital, and she was genuinely interested in hearing about his programming projects. They had discovered they both loved old movies and terrible reality TV shows. Sometimes they would end up watching something together while her laundry finished. "You know," Lisa said one Thursday evening as they folded her freshly cleaned scrubs, "I never thanked you properly for what you did that day." David waved her off. "You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have helped." "No, they wouldn't have," Lisa said firmly. "I lived in an apartment complex for 3 years before moving here, and I barely knew my neighbors' names. When my car broke down in the parking lot, people walked right past me like I was invisible. What you did was special." David felt his cheeks getting warm. He had never been good at accepting compliments, especially from someone as kind and genuine as Lisa. Their friendship had also brought him closer to other people in the neighborhood. Betty had adopted both of them as her unofficial grandchildren, regularly showing up with baked goods and invitations to help with various projects around her house. Through Betty, David had met several other neighbors who had lived on Maple Street for years. There was Mr. Johnson, the retired mechanic who lived 2 houses down and was always working on some old car in his driveway. When David mentioned that his own car had been making strange noises, Mr. Johnson had insisted on taking a look and fixed the problem in less than an hour, refusing to accept any payment. There was also the Rodriguez family, whose teenage daughter had been struggling with math homework. When Betty mentioned that David worked with computers and was good with numbers, he had started tutoring the girl once a week. Her grades had improved dramatically, and her parents had invited David to their family barbecue the previous weekend. The barbecue had been where David realized how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he would have made an excuse to avoid a neighborhood gathering. Too many people, too much small talk, too much pressure to be social. But at the Rodriguez barbecue, he had found himself genuinely enjoying the company of his neighbors. Lisa had been there too, playing games with the younger children and chatting easily with everyone. David had watched her interact with people and marveled at how naturally kind she was to everyone. She remembered details about people's lives and always asked thoughtful questions. The neighborhood kids clearly adored her. "You're staring," Lisa had said, appearing beside him with a plate of food. "Sorry," David had replied, embarrassed at being caught. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now." "Different how?" "I don't know, better, I guess, more connected. I used to spend most of my time alone, and I thought I liked it that way. But this is better." Lisa had smiled at that. "Community is a funny thing. You don't realize how much you need it until you have it. Now, as David sat in his living room on another Saturday afternoon, he was expecting Lisa to come over soon. She had mentioned wanting to try a new detergent that was supposed to be better for her sensitive skin, and she planned to do a load of laundry to test it out. When she arrived, though, she seemed different, more excited than usual, bouncing on her feet like she had good news to share. "Guess what happened at work yesterday," she said, settling into her usual chair at his kitchen table. "What? Remember how I told you we've been short-staffed for months? Well, the hospital finally approved funding for 3 new positions in our department, and my supervisor asked if I wanted to apply for a promotion to shift supervisor." David felt genuinely happy for her. He had heard enough about her work to know how much she deserved recognition for everything she did. "That's amazing," he said. "Are you going to apply?" "I already did," Lisa said, grinning. "The interview is next week. If I get it, it would mean better hours, more money, and I'd get to help train new nurses. It's everything I've been hoping for." "You'll get it," David said with confidence. "They'd be crazy not to promote you." Lisa blushed slightly. "We'll see. But having something to look forward to feels really good." As they started her laundry and settled in to wait, Lisa brought up something that had been on David's mind too. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we should do something nice for Betty. She's done so much for both of us, and I'd like to find a way to pay her back somehow." David had been thinking the same thing. Betty had refused every attempt they had made to thank her properly for the washing machine and all her other kindnesses. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, I know she mentioned that her garden shed needs some repairs before winter, and I also know she's been wanting to repaint her kitchen for years, but keeps saying it's too much work for someone her age. So we could fix her shed and paint her kitchen?" "Exactly. But we'd have to be sneaky about it. Maybe coordinate with her son to plan a weekend when she's visiting her sister or something." David loved the idea. It would be a way to show Betty how much her friendship meant to them, and it would be a project they could work on together. "I'm in," he said. "When do we start planning?" They spent the next hour plotting their surprise home improvement project for Betty, laughing about how they would need to recruit other neighbors to help distract her while they worked. As Lisa folded her clean clothes, David found himself watching her again, not in the obvious way that had gotten him in trouble at the barbecue, but in quiet moments when she was focused on something else. He had developed feelings for her over the past few weeks, but he was terrified of ruining the friendship they had built. Lisa was the kind of person who brought light into every room she entered. She was smart, funny, caring, and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with who she was as a person. David felt lucky just to be her friend, and he didn't want to risk messing that up by making things complicated. "What are you thinking about?" Lisa asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "Just how strange life is," David said. "A month ago, we barely knew each other. Now I can't imagine not having you as a friend." Lisa smiled warmly. "I feel the same way. That crazy day with the washing machine turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not the getting stuck part, obviously, but everything that came after." As she gathered her clean laundry to take home, Lisa paused at David's front door. "Hey, do you want to come with me to the hospital fundraiser next month? It's nothing fancy, just dinner and some speeches, but I think you might enjoy meeting some of the people I work with. Plus, I could use a friend there for moral support." David felt his heart skip a little. Was she asking him as a friend, or as something more? He decided it didn't matter. Either way, he wanted to be there with her. "I'd love to," he said. After Lisa left, David sat in his quiet house and reflected on how much had changed. His Saturday afternoons were no longer just about coffee and newspapers. His weeks had structure and meaning beyond just work. He had people who cared about him and people he cared about in return. The best part was that it all felt natural and unforced. Their friendship had grown organically out of an unusual situation, but it was built on genuine compatibility and mutual respect. Whatever happened in the future, David knew he would always be grateful for that strange Saturday morning when his neighbor got stuck in her washing machine.